Hello everyone, this is PK Entertainment and we are back again, and we're now going to talk about the Zack Snyder Justice League, which was recently debuted on March the 18th on HBO Max, and this will now be a spoiler review. So I recently uploaded my non-spoiler review and you can check that out within my channel, and you can also check the link within the description, and you can also view other reviews of the movies within the DCEU, particularly of Man of Steel, Batman vs Superman, and also the Joss Whedon version of 2017, and I will leave the links for all of those in the description. So I'm pretty sure by now everybody has had a chance to watch the Zack Snyder Justice League version, so I'm going to go full on spoilers now, and I'm not going to go into anything chronological order. I'm just going to talk about the extra material that we saw that was different in comparison to the 2017 version. So this will be much more of a random discussion where I've just made notes on what I believe were the most significant parts of this version of the Justice League movie, and by all means you can comment and agree or disagree with what I make of the significant parts of the new material that we saw about the movie. I've already mentioned overall that I thought this was a decent effort. I admired the visuals and the spectacle, but also I remarked on the fact that there was a real lack of personality and characterization within the characters, and also the major flaws of Zack Snyder's filmmaking and the way overuse of the slow motion and the hectic filmmaking throughout. So those are my quick thoughts and feelings on the vision overall, but we're going to talk about now the new parts within this movie. So the first thing I noticed at the beginning, and we have the Superman scene, and of course if you remember, this was the part that we saw within the trailer. This is the death scene from the Doomsday battle in Batman vs Superman, where Superman had been impaled by Doomsday when he threw the kryptonite staff into his chest. So we see Henry Cavill just screaming out here. And again, it was a strange choice, once again opening the Justice League movie with a weird Superman scene. Now, of course, it wasn't nowhere near as horrific as what we got with the awful CGI face reconstruction from the Joss Whedon version, but it was still just such a strange scene because it really comes out of nowhere, and we see the aura or the energy from his scream, and it reaches right throughout outside of, I believe, Gotham that they're in, and we see it having reverberations all over the world. Essentially, we see Lex Luthor in the Kryptonian ship. Remember, that's how we designed Doomsday. We see Cyborg in his house feeling the effects. We see the Atlanteans in Atlantis feeling the effects, also within Themyscira, and the outcry of his death is so significant that it triggers cracks within all of the mother boxes, and we assume this is what maybe triggered Steppenwolf to come into play. So that was just a really strange choice, and of course we have this weird operatic music as well, so it just really felt a bit out of odds, but I guess they just wanted to start off with a really impactful moment, even though, as for my opinion anyway, the actual death of Superman within Batman vs Superman had zero impact because we had really lack of development. We hadn't seen the heroic version of Superman, and I think that's the only way that the Death of Superman movie works, if you have a good amount of time with the heroic version first, so that when he passes away it carries a lot more weight to it. So really didn't carry too much in terms of this particular scene, but I guess they were just trying to emphasize the Superman and his importance, even though I don't think the films prior to this have done a good job of that anyway. So we go on to the next scene, and I mentioned before in my non-spoiler review where we had an extension of Bruce Wayne on horseback, and he was traveling to recruit Arthur Curry, and we saw an extension really of what we saw in the theatrical cut. This didn't really add much, to be honest. We still had the same dialogue, you know, I hear you talk to fish, and he pins him up against the wall. Those are all there from the original version. What we also got, what I thought was really strange, was when Arthur swims away back to Atlantis, presumably, we get the rest of the townspeople singing this song. I don't know why they put this in. It didn't add anything at all. We almost get like this choir group of people from the town just singing as Bruce walks away. Again, I'm not really sure what Zack Snyder was going for, what effect he was trying to transmit from this scene. I didn't see any kind of emotional resonance from the people singing on here, so I don't understand this scene at all. There was nothing impactful from it. It was just Batman trying to recruit Aquaman. You know, I didn't really see the point of it at all. So yeah, that was just a bit weird. And then after that, we get another scene where we see Martha looking at Clark's grave, and we get that establishment early on that she's lost the farm and it's for sale. And I don't think we got that in the Joss Whedon version till much later on. So I think that was new additional footage. Again, it's just a quick scene. We just move on from that. And then we also, as I mentioned before, my non-spoiler review, we get a much more of a prolonged scene of the bank robbery scene where we saw the emergence of Wonder Woman for the first time. And it was a very prolonged sequence. Again, as I mentioned in my non-spoiler review, we have multiple instances throughout this movie where we get this wailing music. You know, a lot like what we saw from 300 and of course with Spartacus and also with Lord of the Rings. And I don't know why Snyder kept adding this in again and again and again, particularly when we saw of Wonder Woman. As I mentioned in my non-spoiler review, we still get that theme music, which I really like, you know, that really thumping drum beat theme music of hers. I really like that theme music a lot, but for some reason we were just getting this really chorus like sound every time Wonder Woman was on screen or performing action, and I don't know, it just took away from the experience. But this is just an extended sequence, so essentially we have her holding up one of the terrorists in a lasso of truth, and he's telling her about the bomb going off. We still get the same sequence when she's fending off from the bullets when they're shooting. That was really cool. But then we get a really vivid scene on here where the main terrorist is going to shoot her. I think he runs out of bullets, and then she does that typical move of hers where she clashes together both of her gauntlets on her wrists, and she expels his energy, and she essentially blows this guy up. And you see the police outside, and you see this hat floating off. And once again, we're going back into that mode where the main superheroes are just natural born killers. There was no reason for Wonder Woman to kill this guy. You know, she could have easily just disarmed him and just taken the gun away from him. But for some reason, she had to use her energy waves and blast to, you know, really blast him away. And again, it just leaves a bad taste in my mouth. Even though, yes, Wonder Woman is much more of the warrior of the trinity of heroes, to say, and she has been brought up to do what's necessary, but you still have to make it necessary, right? So if you have her killing a person when she doesn't have to kill a person, it just still leaves a bad taste, I would have felt. But you just move on from there as well. So the next scene that we have was the Steppenwolf attack on Themyscira, and as I mentioned before, it was enhanced in terms of intensity. We still get the multiple slow motion sequences, and this is something I found very frustrating out, particularly when we look at the Amazonians. So we see Steppenwolf emerging, and then we see Hippolyta, played by Connie Nielsen. She looks very good in that role. And we just get these slow motion scenes when she's commanding the Amazonians and she's running towards the mother box, or she's giving a signal to one of the fellow Amazonians, or when she's running through the corridor, or she's sliding under the wall. Everything is just slow motion, and he just overdid it, Zack Snyder, and it just took it away from this particular sequence. Even though it's very good, we still get the horse chase. We still get the massive army of Amazonians chasing away when Steppenwolf attains one of the mother boxes. You do get some hints where you can see the CGI is clearly like green screen, something that takes away from the immersiveness of this particular sequence. Nothing too distracting, I suppose, but again, it's just something that you will notice when you're looking at the sequence. So at that point, I believe that was the part one. If you remember, this film was originally set in chapters, so I think it's around 6 chapters, and I think this was outlined on Twitter, I think, by Zack Snyder a couple of days ago prior to this release. So that was the part one of the 6 chapters that we got on here. I still believe this should have been a mini series, but there you go, that was the end of part 1, which was okay. So we then moved on to the part 2, which was the Age of Heroes, and we started off this with Batman discussing with Alfred about recruiting heroes. Again, I very much like Jeremy Irons' performance as Alfred. He was one of the best characters, I believe, within the Justice League movie, and he continues that on here. And I very much like the back and forth they had, particularly with Diana. There's a scene later on, it might be chapter 3 or 4, when they're just discussing how to make tea, and it's just great. You needed more moments like that, just little moments of banter, just to get away from the overall seriousness of this movie. And I don't think there was enough moments in there. I did like another scene later on with this movie where they all show up at Bruce's house and they're all kind of high-fiving Alfred or complimenting him, and I thought that was very good. Just little lighter moments. We needed more of that throughout the movie, but Jeremy Irons was a major plus for me throughout this movie. That we don't get the original scene that we had from the 2017 version where Batman was fighting a parademon in Gotham. If you remember, I believe that was one of the opening scenes throughout the movie. We don't get that at all, and the fact that Commissioner Gordon comes in early on within that version of the movie, in this version I don't think he comes into at least the hour and 42-minute mark, and we see him talking in the police station before he later on assembles the League of Heroes. So that was nothing too special. I mean, it's always great to see J.K. Simmons in the role. He looks typically like what you would assume a Commissioner Gordon to look like, so nothing wrong with that scene. But yeah, I just think that was obviously a Joss Whedon. Maybe that was a mandated that they had to have some sort of Batman set piece to begin the movie within the 2017 movie, but Zack Snyder didn't feel the need to do that as well. We get another sequence where we haven't seen before, where we see Diana looking down to the caves where she sees all of the archaeological markings, if you like, of Darkseid. This follows the previous scene where, of course, the Amazonians, they shot the arrow to indicate to Diana what was going on following Steppenwolf attaining one of the mother boxes. So again, this wasn't nothing too significant, but I think it just was just adding the threat level of Darkseid and a discovery and trying to ramp up the suspense and tension, but nothing too overly significant, but fine. And Gal Gadot, as usual, she looks very beautiful in this scene when we see her looking at all the signs. Like, the first surprise cameo was William Dafoe, and he was Arthur's mentor, if you remember, from the Aquaman movie, and yep, he did very well in that role. And here we see him appearing, I think it's the scene prior to when Arthur talks to Mera underwater, and at this point he's just warning Arthur to protect the mother boxes of Atlantis. So maybe this is further providing some background motivations and reason why we saw Arthur later on appearing and talking to Mera. Again, nothing too significant. I mean, it's welcome to see William Dafoe on screen always. It wasn't going on for too long, so it's not a scene that I think harms the movie, but again, it's one of those where it didn't really need to be in there because we'd already established the mother boxes, the fact that they are in Atlantis, so Aquaman was already talking to Mera, she refers to it as well, so there was no real reason for this scene with William Dafoe, but it was just a welcome cameo as well, and just offered some background reference to the Aquaman movie as well. So we move on from there, and then we get the first sighting of Darkseid. I think it's around the 57th minute, and he appears in a molten-like form. And if you've seen the TV spots, you know this appears on here. And we see Steppenwolf pleading with him to return to Darkseid and Apocalypse. Apparently, he did something wrong previously on Apocalypse, and now he owes Darkseid 50,000 mules, I think, something like that. He owes him a huge amount, I guess, of money or currency, whatever way you want to put about it. And that's the reason I think he's been exiled on this quest to collect the mother boxes. And this was good, and I mentioned in my non-spoiler review, this was actually providing us with some good context and some background on Steppenwolf, because we mentioned in the original version, he just came across as such a bad generic villain. There was literally no weight to his character, not to mention the fact that it was very bad CGI rendering as well. So I liked the fact that here we were getting some form of substance. I don't think we were necessarily asked to be sympathetic towards Steppenwolf, but we just understand his motivation, that yes, he was doing this not just because he was serving Darkseid, but because he wanted to prove to himself and get himself back to Apocalypse and go on more significant missions. So I liked that scene overall, and the molten effect was just a nice way. I mean, I think I would have preferred to just have them appear, but I guess maybe that was too much in terms of providing the effect shot, so I didn't mind that too much. So just good development for Steppenwolf in that regard. Now shortly after that, we do get that epic Lord of the Rings style of origin story of the original Darkseid invasion around the hour mark within the movie. And again, I think this changed because I do believe that Diana was explaining this when her and Bruce are in the woods and they're literally tracking down Cyborg, and I think that's when she explains this origin battle. But in this version they change it because this is when Diana is in the warehouse, I think, talking to Bruce, and she explains about it. So we get a lot more of a longer exposition of Diana talking about it, and I thought at the beginning it got in the way of this sequence because I wanted this to be a real entirety sequence on its own. As I mentioned before, very similar to the many battles that we saw within Lord of the Rings. And as I said in my non-spoiler review, this is one of the two real standout scenes throughout this movie, and this is very well done again, as we see all of the Amazonians, the Atlanteans, the mankind and the gods all taking on. This time it's Darkseid, because if you remember the original film, it was Steppenwolf, as we see, emerging and surrounding all of the other people from Apocalypse. This time it's Darkseid, and we see him jumping down from the ship and striking down the ground in order to exhibit all of the energies. Now, he looked okay, Darkseid. Obviously the effects were far more better than what we saw in the original first trailer for this Justice League version, so he did look better. Yeah, it was convincing enough, it was textured enough, very well rendered. Still nowhere near the amazing immersive character that we got from Thanos within Infinity War and Endgame. People will say it's an unfair comparison, but again, I think it just shows the massive missed opportunity that if they'd have structured this DC universe properly, then we could have got a Darkseid that was on the same level and effects as what we got in terms of Thanos. But still, this is a very good sequence, and I loved, again, we see the Green Lantern character. I'm not quite sure who it was. I think it was just a random character that they created on here, but still very good in terms of its effects as well. One thing we did see was that Darkseid was fatally wounded. I don't know who it was. I think it was one of the gods. He had this massive axe and he struck Darkseid down, fatally wounded him in the shoulder. This is, of course, I think, Darkseid in his Prince Zack's form. If you know your mythology, he was pretty much a standard soldier before he went on to become the feared Darkseid that we know today. So that was a very good sequence as well. They didn't really loot it, which was a shame, and I was a bit underwhelmed, to be honest, at the lack of Darkseid. You know, I understand we weren't going to get an immersive character like we got with Thanos, because obviously this is additional footage, but I just think, again, if you're going to put Darkseid in it, you want a bit more in terms of his dialogue, a bit more involvement from him, than rather than just being this random CGI character. So that was a bit disappointing for me, but overall that was a very good sequence, and it did have amazing moments. And I think that was the end of part 2, which I believe was the Age of Heroes. So we then go to the part 3, and again, this is where we got a bit of inconsistency, because after all of the super serious tone of the first few chapters, it led to more humorous tone when we see Ezra Miller's Flash, and I think he's applying for a job at a store. And then we got the sequence that we saw really throughout previous trailers, where we see him rescuing Iris in that super slow-mo. I mean, I mentioned before about the slow motion nature of the sequences, but this was a tripling down. This was just super slow. We got this weird music pop song. I don't even know what it was. I don't know why Zack Snyder did it like this. It added nothing to the Flash in terms of his abilities. There was no amazement, there was no awe about it. Just to get this super slow-mo sequence where he saves Iris, and they did recently announce that the actress who plays Iris in this sequence will be the Iris Allen in the Flash movie as well. So I think that's fair enough. You know, that's something, you know, you just want to keep consistent within the tone as well. So it was just super slow motion. I don't know why it did it. It was very weird. So we move on from that, and we get further scenes of Steppenwolf just gathering Atlantean soldiers on the beach and threatening them. Again, just giving him more presence and intent. And then we get an introduction of Cyborg, where we see him playing his football game. Again, we've seen this from the trailers. Once again, Zack Snyder's got to do it in slow motion. I don't know why he had to do this. It just doesn't add anything. Why couldn't it just have the American football game in its entirety? We continue, and this is where we get the tragic backstory of Cyborg, where he's talking to his mother in the car, and then we see that they're involved in a car crash. And I think this is very typical of Zack Snyder's filmmaking, because prior to this moment, we have all of these prolonged montage-like sequences of people walking on the mountains, or, as I mentioned before, with the Flash. But this should have been a major impactful scene where we see a car crash and his mother dying. But it's all done so quickly, and we zip through all quickly, and then we see Victor in the hospital suffering horrific injuries. And this should have been perhaps the most emotionally impactful scene throughout the whole movie, right? Because it's a tragedy. but it's skipped over so quickly, and once again it shows that Snyder is more interested in the action sequences or the action poses, if you like, but when it comes to a much more of an emotional moment, he just skips over it. It's like he doesn't know how to deal with much more character intimate moments. He just brushes them aside too quickly. So there was a weird sequence as well where we see him visualizing his ability. So he's in the suit and he's kind of doing like an Iron Man, testing that out, and he's trying to zoom up and he's trying to fly. And we intercut that with some of the visions, and we saw this throughout the trailer. So if you remember, there's that scene where he's standing and he's pushing down the rockets on the field. And I knew straight away when I saw that trailer for the first time that this was a dream sequence. But we get others where I think he's seeing two werewolves or two wildebeests fighting each other. And then he goes into this like temple, and then he's going through and he's touching through all the touch screens. And then he sees this homeless mother. Now, I thought this was relating to maybe a previous family. Was it maybe his real mother? Was he adopted? I'm not sure, but for some reason, he took exception to this homeless mother, and he sees her history where she's struggling with her kids, and then she goes to the cash point and he inflates her bank balance to over £100,000. So very nice for her. But again, I think they were just trying to show Cyborg more empathetic side, but again, it just felt more surface level. We had all of this music and once again this montage, and I suppose it was well intended, but it never really stuck for me. It was just all surface level, and I just don't get why we were concentrating on that woman so much. Again, we don't refer to it again throughout the rest of the movie, so I don't understand why we had that in there as well. That was really the end of part 3. I think at the end they basically established that they're going to revive Superman, and that was the end of part 3. So then we come to part 4. I think it was titled Part Machine, and this is where we go much more into the team, and we see them within that tunnel battle. And one thing I did like, actually, they do explain, because one thing ridiculous from the original trailer is that we saw Batman deflecting the energy beams with his wrist on, and I thought, this is ridiculous. This is just fanboying over Batman, because as we all know, Batman's invincible. He can beat everybody if he's got enough prep time. But they do explain it, and basically it was Alfred just making his gauntlets much more resistant to energy waves. So I do like that they explain it, and that came across later on. If you see when Superman resuscitates and he's using his heat vision and Batman's able to block it off. So that was good that they explained that. And again, you don't have to go into it too much, and it makes sense, of course, because we all know Batman is very advanced in all the gadgets and technology that he's got. So that made sense. So just little things like that, just to explain something silly as Batman deflecting energy waves, was good as well. The tunnel battle was still most the same as what it was with the original version. It felt a bit clunky at times, but I've always thought that about the original battle as well. Another very interesting element was Steppenwolf realizing that the anti-life equation was actually within the Earth service. Now, if you know your DC mythology, you know that is the burning desire for Darkseid, that he ultimately wants to search for the anti-life equation because he believes that is a source of free will, and if he can obtain the anti-life equation, he can control all beings within the universe. So again, this is clearly a setup for the second Justice League movie. Again, if you know about the history of this project, it was originally going to be a two-parter, right? So the first movie was going to be the battle against Steppenwolf, and then the second part was going to be about the fight against Darkseid. And the biggest reveal, the second big reveal, was that of Martian Manhunter. Now, we got the original scene throughout the 2017 movie where we see Martha talking to Lois about, of course, the loss of Clark. But then when she steps outside, her eyes glow red, and it turns out to be Martian Manhunter. Now, he looked very cool. Now, again, if you cover this, you already got a glimpse of what Martian Manhunter looked like, because Jim Lee did a cover for the Justice League movie and he showed the representation of Martian Manhunter. And I really like this version. It looked really cool. He's very tall. I like the body armor. I like the overall design. The only thing I question is, why did he go to visit Lois Lane? I didn't get that. There was no reason at all for him to visit Lois Lane. Now, yes, he knows Lois Lane through Man of Steel and Batman vs Superman, but they never truly had a close conversation. In fact, she was a bit of a nuisance to him when she was investigating the whole incident within Africa within Batman vs Superman. So I didn't get the reason why he had to show up and talk to Lois. Didn't really understand that at all. But again, it was just really cool to see Martian Manhunter. We go on to the next thing, and I think we were now into part 5 when all the King's horses. So again, we were just going up now into digging up Superman. That was a change, I think, from the original version, because in that scene, it's only Flash and Cyborg that are digging up Superman. But in this scene here, it's all of them. It's Diana, Arthur as well. And we all see them lifting up his coffin as well. So that was a major change on there. And one thing we get is when I think it's the Emergence of Superman, and they're using the mother boxes, and this is the scene where Flash has to use his Speed Force in order for Cyborg able to transmit the mother box in order to resuscitate Superman. We get this weird alternate version of the future where we see Darkseid coming to the fore, and we see Darkseid obtaining all the mother boxes. We see him in Atlantis. I think we see him in Themyscira, and we also see a scene where Superman is mourning over a skeleton. We presume it's Lois, because that's the narrative they've been pushing out throughout this cinematic universe, is that basically we're going to get a typical Injustice storyline when Lois Lane dies, and that's what causes Superman to go all evil, destroying the Earth, as what we saw within the Nightmare sequence. And if you remember, the original plan for this 2-part story arc was for Superman to be resuscitated in the black suit, and then Darkseid was going to take control of Superman, and then that's when the heroes have to go against him. So that's what this was hinting at. Again, whether we see Justice League Part 2, I very much doubt it, but that's what this was hinting at, where Darkseid was taking control over Superman. And yeah, we saw Darkseid much more in his blue, silver costume that we associate him with, and yeah, it did look cool, but it was happening so quick. It was a bit random all over the place, but that's what they're hinting at. And we all know, Zack Snyder believes in the darker Superman, and giving him the choice, he clearly wants to do the Injustice storyline. We saw that in particular with Batman vs Superman, and we saw that again at the end credit scene or the epilogue throughout this movie as well. So we still get the same scene of Superman fighting the League as what we saw in 2017. That moment as well when he sees the Flash run along. That's a lot of people that's a lot of dialogue people like. They left out the "Do you bleed" line. If you remember, that was a line of dialogue that what Superman stated in Batman vs Superman. Joss Whedon kind of reversed that line in this version, but they took that scene out. I don't know why. Again, it didn't really matter as such. We see Superman fly off with Lois, and then we go back to the scene where Silas has taken away the mother box. Again, this was a ridiculous thing in both the original version and this version here, where they all know that Steppenwolf is after these mother boxes, so they kind of lose track and leave it on the top of the car. It was ridiculous, but here Silas takes it, and we get the death scene where I think he was trying to destroy the mother box, but later on it was established that he was heating up the mother box so they could trace it. I didn't really understand what he was trying. I thought he was trying to destroy the mother box, and of course it ends up costing his life. He explodes. Steppenwolf gets the mother box and flies away. So that was another scene that we didn't see in the 2017 version. Also, the moments between Bruce and Diana were taken away. If you remember the Joss Whedon version, they had 2 very long scenes. One was when there was arguing back and forth where Diana was accusing Bruce of basically being too distant from the group, and he retorted saying that she was distant by walking away from man all of those years following the death of Steve Trevor, and she pinned him against the wall. That was taken away. And also the later on scene where we see them coming together, kind of reconciliate, and again they took that scene away as well. So I don't know why there was less scenes between Bruce and Diana. I don't know why they took those scenes away, but that was the difference on here as well. The Climatic Fight, as I mentioned before, in non-spoiler reviews, handled a lot better. I mentioned before they removed the red filter from the Joss Whedon cut, and they had the more blue-grey filter. Much better visually, just better contrast. We, of course, had the meeting up with Superman and Lois, and the coming together of Superman and Lois and Martha. And then of course we got the black suit Emergence. I'm not sure why he had to take the black suit. Again, that's just referring to the comics, but of course the comics had greater context because that was when he was coming back from his death. But here, there was no reason why he couldn't have just used the red and blue suit. Like, there was no reason for the black and suit Superman. But Henry Cavill looks cool, and as I said in my non-spoiler review, he looks cool. He fought well in the fights, but nothing too special ahead with that as well. So very fine, fair enough. Looks cool in the suit. Came across at the end of the battle where we see Cyborg's going to get struck down, and then Superman intervenes and he says that's not very impressive, and he pounds down Steppenwolf. And yeah, this is all very good. We see lots of stand-up moments with Superman, Aquaman and the Flash. We have that another violent moment of Wonder Woman where she decapitates Steppenwolf, and I think this is again where Zack Snyder wants to give that harder edge to Wonder Woman. I don't mind it when she's fighting off parademons and the main villain, but as I mentioned at the beginning, I just find it a bit bad taste when she kills someone when she doesn't have to. You know, it's fine when she's taking on superpower beings that are trying to kill her, fair enough, but when she's taking on normal human beings where she could easily disarm them, there's no need for her to decapitate person. But yeah, that was satisfying. And then of course they changed it as well, because in the original version, the minions from Apocalypse, they take away Steppenwolf when he's failed, but here of course he's killed, and then the mother box opens the boom tube, and then that's when Darkseid can see the visions of Superman and the other heroes. And another thing to mention as well, they did this scene again where this was really an exhibition of the Speed Force. So obviously at the Battle of Steppenwolf, Cyborg is trying to unify all the mother boxes in order to destroy it. We see Darkseid coming through, and I think this is a point where essentially Darkseid comes through because the Flash is injured, so he doesn't come back quickly enough, and Cyborg transmit the buffer boxes too late, and then I think that results in Darkseid killing everybody. So this is the point, as we saw in the trailers, where essentially Flash runs back in time, uses the Speed Force, he reverses time, and he comes back and unifies with Cyborg to stop Darkseid coming through and killing everybody. So again, this was a visualization of the Speed Force, and very good overall, but it's all done very quickly. So essentially they stop Steppenwolf, they close the boom tube, Darkseid says he'll use more traditional methods to invade them, so again setting up the sequel, which we probably will never get. And then we just get the close-up shots where we see all the heroes standing on the cliff tops, as what we saw within the trailers. Of course, the only difference here being that Superman is in the black suit rather than the red and blue suit. And that is really the end of the movie, really. Rounded off more convincingly in 4 hours. We get montages where we see, and this is the epilogue chapter, where we see all of the heroes going away now. We see Superman in his Clark Kent suit, opening the shirt. It's in the black suit. Joss Whedon changed. That should have been a red and blue suit at the end there, and we don't see him flying off. He just rips the shirt open. We see for the Flash going back to his father and telling him that he's got a job as well. So again, we're setting up things for the Flash movie. And then we see just Diana and Bruce going back to normal. They go back to the Wayne Manor, and again, I think this is setting up the Justice Hall society, where they say, right, we can have a round table and it's suited for 6, but it can fit a lot more people in. So again, this is just reference and set up to future movies that we probably will never see in the future. But overall, it was a well-rounded ending. But again, you would expect a well-rounded ending given the fact that it's a 4-hour movie. So then we go to the end, really, and we see the end credit scene that we saw from the original version, where Lex Luthor has broken out of, I think it was Arkham or prison, wherever it was, and we see him on the boat talking to Deathstroke. He reveals that basically Bruce Wayne is Batman, and this is maybe hinting that maybe Deathstroke coming to Batman will never see that now, because obviously we're going ahead with the Patterson version. And then we go back to the nightmare sequence, and this was really weird when I was watching this, because it continues the storyline that we saw from the Batman versus Superman in this alternate reality, where we see Batman in his original kind of Mad Max style gear, and he's joined this time by Cyborg and the Flash in his weird kind of armor vision, and they're joined by Mira and Deathstroke, and of course they're seeing the world destroyed initially by Darkseid, and then they talk to Jared Leto's Joker, and yeah, it's just a weird scene. I think they were just putting Joker just for the sake of Joker. We all know how much DC likes to overuse the character, but yeah, Jared Leto's performance is just weird. He's talking at one point and then he's just smiling. He's not even saying anything, he's just smiling. It's really cringy, it's just really weird. Doesn't act any effect, it's not scary, it's not intense, he's just smiling, not even saying anything. And it's just strange, and I'm just watching this scene at the moment thinking, where are we going? What the hell are we doing here? Why are we even showing this extended sequence? It's got no bearing at all but what's going on. Jared Leto's Joker just referred to the multiverse. As we all know, the DC movies, they are pushing ahead of the multiverse, so we're going to expect over the next 5 years all of these different interpretations, because they don't know what they're doing. They don't know how to construct a singular continuity with the DC superheroes. I've talked about this at length in other videos, but yeah, that is just basically it, where he refers to the multiple universe, and then at the end we get again the evil Superman. He swoops down and we assume that he's going to take them all out. Again, this is just more pandering to the Injustice storyline that Zack Snyder desperately wants to do. You can tell he wants to do that. If he had the opportunity to do Injustice, he would take it in a heartbeat. But I didn't see the point of this, and Bruce just wakes up. It's a dream, and then we get the final revelation where we see Martian Manhunter coming up to Bruce, telling him, of course, that Darkseid is coming. Again, this is more setting up for the Intended Justice League Part 2. Again, I really like the design of Martian Manhunter. It's textured, it's really cool. They really went all out in supporting him, and he looks very much like the actor who plays General Swanwick, I think, in the Batman vs Superman as well. So it was really cool looking. I'm not sure from previous versions, I think this might have been originally Green Lantern that was going to show up. Maybe it was Abin Sur or Kilowog that was going to show up, or Tobar Ray. I think it was originally going to be a Green Lantern, but eventually it's Martian Manhunter, and he shows up and he just alludes to that in the future. And that's when it ends, and that's really the overall main spoiler bits of the Justice League. So as I mentioned in my non-spoiler review, very much of fan references and Easter eggs to get you excited about, but I think overall it's something that we may not probably and likely won't see, as I mentioned in my non-spoiler review, unless we get a huge upsurge in subscribers. I'm talking at least 5 to 10 million subscribers from this Snyder Cut. Then that will convince Warner Brothers that it's a risk again, you know, plunking in what would at least be 150 million to 200 million for an extended series, I suppose, as opposed to another movie involving all of these characters. I don't think they're going to risk that, you know, in the long run. I think Zack Snyder is done. He's going to move on to his other projects, and this will probably be the last we see, unless we get it continued in an animated format or a comic book format later on down the line. So, yep, that's it really. That's the end of all the spoilerific scenes that we saw throughout the Justice League. Like I said, I'm ready now just to put this to bed. As you all know, I've never been a fan of this universe, but I had to see this 4-hour version just to really bring closure. And as I mentioned before in my non-spoiler review, I think this finally bats away the excuse that I think this would have been as successful at the box office. Again, it would have been trimmed down to 2.5 hours, because it shares the same dark, bleak tone of Batman vs Superman, and I think that still would have put off a lot of audiences, and I really don't think we would have got the same reception as what we got for any of the Avengers movies in the long run. So that's it really. That is it, the Snyder Cut. I don't think we're going to get any more. We can bring this now to a close. That's all of the main spoilerific details that I saw, but let me know what you think in the comments below. What did you like most about the new material that we saw? I know this is quite a lengthy video, but then again, it was a 4-hour movie, and there was a lot of additional material that we did see throughout the movie as well. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Also, you can check out my non-spoiler review and all my other coverage of the DCEU in terms of trailer reviews and previous movies, and we just wonder where we will go ahead in the future. We've got, of course, now the Patterson Batman coming out. I believe they've recently wrapped up production now, so we'll probably see that maybe at the end of this year or maybe next year. depending on COVID, etc. We've got Wonder Woman 3 coming up. We know that's a go, even though there was a mixed to lukewarm reaction for the Wonder Woman 1984. We know Aquaman 2 is coming, we know Shazam is coming, and we also know Black Adam starring Dwayne Johnson is coming. So we wait to see those in the forefront. We still can't get a Superman standalone movie. I personally think Henry Cavill is done now. We've had all these rumours about a black Superman, completely ridiculous, but I think Henry Cavill is done, and obviously Ben Affleck left as well with all their alternate versions in terms of the multiverse. So I think we've reached the end of the Snyder'S. I will leave it here now. I'll probably do a supplementary video, just give them all my final conclusive thoughts of the Snyder'S and why I believe it failed the DC heroes, but you maybe have a different point of view. But just let me know what you think in the comments below. But that's it now in terms of my extensive spoiler review of the Zack Snyder Justice League version. Please hit those like and subscribe and notification buttons and help me provide you with more review and content like this in the long run. But that's it for now. Take care of yourselves, stay at safe distances, and I will see you very, very soon.